The 7 strange places erased from map. Discovered? Some places disappear naturally. They are either consumed by time, weather, or economic collapse. But other places are deliberately erased, their existence scrubbed from official records, and removed from maps by design. These 7 locations were intentionally forgotten, their coordinates classified, their histories buried. What you're about to learn are the stories they never wanted you to know. 1. Sanctuary Hills, West Virginia erased, 1967. Population, 0, formerly 2,847. If you look at modern maps of West Virginia, you'll find a perfect circle of protected forest land between Charleston and Huntington. No roads lead into it, no hiking trails cross it, and satellite imagery shows nothing but dense woodland. But property records from before 1967 tell a different story. This was once Sanctuary Hills, a thriving coal mining town of nearly 3,000 residents. The official story claims the town was evacuated due to underground mine fires that made the area uninhabitable. But miners' families who were relocated tell a more disturbing tale. The fires weren't burning coal, they were burning something else entirely. It started with a deep excavation in Shaft 7, where miners broke through into a cavern system that predated human civilization. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, and the air carried sounds that resembled human screaming mixed with something far more ancient. Workers reported finding structures down there, not built by human hands, but grown like organic tissue into impossible geometric shapes. Within weeks of the discovery, every resident of Sanctuary Hills began experiencing identical nightmares, standing in a vast underground cathedral while something enormous and unseen called their names and voices of dead loved ones. Children drew pictures of the same twisted symbols they'd never seen, and pets refused to enter homes, choosing to huddle together in the town square. The evacuation order came suddenly. Military personnel arrived with no identification, giving residents exactly 4 hours to pack essential items before permanent relocation. Those who resisted were declared psychologically compromised and institutionalized. The town was demolished within a month, and the entire area was reforested with trees that grew with unnatural speed. Former residents who tried to return report GPS systems malfunctioning when they approached the coordinates, leading them in circles until they give up. Satellite images show only forest, but thermal imaging reveals geometric heat patterns beneath the ground. The same patterns from the cave symbols, now stretched across acres of buried earth. Local folklore among relocated families speaks of the Kalinga phenomenon, where former Sanctuary Hills residents sometimes wake up missing, found days later standing at the forest's edge, claiming they heard their families calling them home from underground. They remember nothing of their journey, but their shoes are always filled with black soil that contains no organic matter and resists all attempts at scientific analysis. The West Virginia Department of Natural Resources maintains that the protected forest exists to preserve an ecologically sensitive watershed, but declassified military documents from 1967 reference containment protocols for subterranean anomalous entities and warn that surface disruption of the site could result in emergence of designation Deep Choir. 2. New Providence Island, Alaska. Erased. 1983. Population, 0, formerly 341. According to official records, New Providence Island never existed, but maritime logs from fishing vessels, weather reports from the National Weather Service, and even old Rand McNally atlases from the 1970s clearly show a small island in the Gulf of Alaska, approximately 60 miles southwest of Kodiak Island. New Providence was home to a small fishing community and a Coast Guard weather station. Life was harsh but peaceful until 1982, when residents began reporting that the island was shrinking. Not erosion, actual shrinkage. Buildings that were once a quarter mile from the shore found themselves at the water's edge. The island's circumference was measurably decreasing by several feet each week. The phenomenon accelerated rapidly. By spring 1983, the island had lost nearly 40% of its landmass. But here's the impossible part. The buildings and inhabitants weren't falling into the sea. They were compressing together, somehow occupying less space while remaining physically unchanged. Coast Guard personnel described visiting the island and finding the entire population of 341 people living in an area that should have only accommodated about 50. Houses were crammed together with no space between them, yet residents moved freely as if the spaces still existed. When questioned, islanders seemed unaware that anything had changed, describing their community exactly as it had been when the island was full-size. The final Coast Guard report, classified until 2019, describes the island as dimensionally unstable and recommends immediate evacuation. But when the rescue vessels arrived, they found only empty ocean. No debris, no survivors, no trace that an island had ever existed there. Even more disturbing, sonar readings showed the ocean floor at that location was 12,000 feet deep, far deeper than the surrounding area. Maritime records were quietly altered to remove all references to New Providence Island. Charts were reprinted, weather station logs were redacted, and families of the missing residents were told their loved ones had died in classified military operations in Alaska. But commercial fishermen still report strange encounters at the island's former coordinates. Ships' instruments detect solid ground where charts show only ocean, and several vessels have reported running aground on invisible land. Survivors describe walking on solid earth that their eyes couldn't see, encountering the residents of New Providence who continue living their lives, unaware that their island no longer exists in normal space. The most disturbing reports come from deep-sea research vessels. Sonar occasionally detects a landmass at the coordinates, but only for minutes at a time, appearing and disappearing like something rising from the ocean depths before sinking again. When researchers attempt to investigate, they find themselves approaching an island that looks exactly like New Providence, but their instruments insist they're still surrounded by deep ocean. Theoretical physicists who have studied the classified reports suggest that New Providence Island collapsed into a pocket dimension, taking its residents with it. The island still exists, but in a space that occupies the same coordinates while being completely removed from normal reality. The residents continue their lives in a compressed version of their world, occasionally intersecting with our dimension when dimensional barriers weaken. 3. Millbrook Junction, Nevada erased, 1991. Population? 0, formerly 1,200. In the Nevada desert, there's a stretch of Interstate 50 where GPS systems consistently malfunction and mile markers skip from 247 to 251 with no explanation. According to official highway records, nothing exists at mile markers 248, 249, and 250. But truckers and travelers from before 1991 remember Millbrook Junction, a small desert town that served as a rest stop between Reno and Salt Lake City. Millbrook Junction was unremarkable. A truck stop, a diner, a small motel, and a few dozen houses for the families who worked there. What made it special was its location at the intersection of 3 major highways, a perfect stopping point for cross-country travelers. The town thrived on its convenience and hospitality. The trouble began in 1990 when travelers started reporting that they couldn't find Millbrook Junction on return trips. People who had stopped there for gas or food just days earlier would drive the same route and find only empty desert. When they called the phone numbers from business cards or matchbooks collected in town, they reached numbers that had been disconnected for years. Investigation by the Nevada Department of Transportation revealed something impossible. Millbrook Junction appeared on maps and in records, but the physical location showed no signs of ever being inhabited. No building foundations, no utility lines, no evidence of roads or infrastructure. Soil analysis showed the ground had been undisturbed for thousands of years. Even more disturbing were the testimonies of people who claimed to have interacted with Millbrook Junction residents. They provided detailed descriptions of conversations with townspeople, meals they'd eaten at the diner, and purchases they'd made. But their receipts showed transactions with businesses that had never existed, and the money they'd spent was returned to their bank accounts as error corrections for payments to non-existent vendors. The town was officially erased from maps in 1991, with highway authorities claiming it had been included due to cartographic errors dating back decades. But the erasure didn't stop people from experiencing Millbrook Junction. Travelers still report stopping in the town, especially late at night or during severe weather conditions. These modern encounters follow a disturbing pattern. Visitors find Millbrook Junction exactly as it was in 1990, with the same residents going about their daily lives. But when travelers try to leave, they often find themselves driving in circles on roads that should lead back to the interstate. Some report driving for hours through a desert that stretches impossibly far in all directions, with Millbrook Junction always visible in their rearview mirrors. Cell phone towers in the area occasionally receive calls from numbers registered to Millbrook Junction businesses. The calls consist of recorded messages, dinner specials from the diner, room availability at the motel, and gas prices that are decades out of date. When technicians trace these calls, they originate from coordinates where only empty desert exists. The most unsettling aspect is that travelers who stop in Millbrook Junction often report feeling like they've been there before. Even on their first visit, they know the layout of the town, recognize the faces of residents, and remember conversations they've never had. It's as if Millbrook Junction exists in a loop of time, endlessly repeating the same few days from 1990, with each visitor becoming temporarily part of its recurring narrative. Highway patrol officers refuse to investigate reports of Millbrook Junction sightings, but internal memos suggest they're under orders to redirect such reports to federal authorities. Declassified documents reference the town as a temporal anomaly and recommend that travelers who claim to have visited be monitored for dimensional displacement syndrome 4. Blackwater Research Station, Antarctica, erased. 1995. Population 0, formerly 47. Antarctica is one of the most mapped continents on Earth, with every research station carefully documented for safety and supply purposes. But if you examine satellite imagery of the Ross Ice Shelf from before 1995, you'll find a research station that no longer appears on any official records. Blackwater Research Station. Blackwater was established in 1987 as a joint international facility for studying prehistoric ice core samples. The station was built above a depression in the ice where cores dating back millions of years could be extracted from unusual geological formations. The research conducted there was classified, but personnel files indicate they were studying organic matter preserved in ancient ice, matter that predated known life on Earth. Communication with Blackwater ceased abruptly on March 15, 1995. The final transmission, received by McMurdo Base, consisted of panicked voices reporting that the specimens are not extinct, and that something had emerged from the deep cores. The transmission ended with screams, and the sound of tearing metal, followed by complete radio silence. A rescue team dispatched from McMurdo Base found the coordinates empty except for a perfectly circular hole in the ice, approximately 200 feet in diameter and of immeasurable depth. No trace of the research station, its equipment, or its personnel was ever found. Ice samples from the rim of the hole contained organic compounds that didn't match any known terrestrial life forms. International authorities agreed to classify the incident and remove all references to Blackwater Research Station from public records. Official reports claimed the station had been decommissioned due to budget constraints, and that all personnel had been reassigned to other facilities. Family members of the missing researchers were told their loved ones had died in a vehicle accident during an ice storm, but Antarctic researchers continued to report anomalous readings from the Blackwater coordinates. Seismic equipment detects regular, rhythmic vibrations from deep within the ice, patterns that suggest something massive moving in the depths below. Ground-penetrating radar occasionally shows structures beneath the ice, but when teams are sent to investigate, they find only solid ice sheets with no evidence of the detected formations. The most disturbing reports come from aircraft flying over the area. Pilots describe seeing lights moving beneath the ice, forming geometric patterns that shift and change as if responding to observation. Some report radio interference that sounds like human voices speaking in unknown languages, mixed with sounds that could be machinery or something biological. Thermal imaging from satellites shows temperature variations at the site that form complex, shifting patterns. The patterns appear to be deliberate, almost like a form of communication. Antarctic researchers have detected similar thermal signatures at other locations around the continent, suggesting that whatever emerged from the deep cores at Blackwater has spread to multiple sites. Recent declassified documents reveal that Blackwater Research Station was studying samples that contained non-terrestrial cellular structures, and that researchers had reported the specimens showed signs of adaptive response to environmental stimuli despite being millions of years old. The final research log, recovered from McMurdo Base archives, ends with the chilling observation: "We are not studying extinction events, we are studying hibernation cycles, and something very large is waking up." 5. Cedar Point Suburb, Ohio. Erased. 1988. Population 0, formerly 15,000. In 1988, the suburb of Cedar Point, Ohio, was home to 15,000 residents living in a planned community of identical houses arranged in perfect geometric patterns. The suburb was a model of 1980s American efficiency. Every house identical, every lawn maintained to the same specifications, every family following the same daily routines. It was supposed to be a paradise of suburban conformity. Cedar Point was built by Harmonic Development Corporation as an experimental community designed to optimize human social interactions through environmental engineering. Every aspect of the suburb was planned according to psychological research. The width of streets, the height of houses, even the color of mailboxes was chosen to promote community harmony and reduce individual stress. The experiment worked too well. By 1987, residents of Cedar Point had become unnaturally synchronized. Families woke at exactly the same time, ate identical breakfasts, and left for work in perfectly timed intervals. Children played the same games at the same times, using the same words and gestures. Adults had conversations that followed identical scripts, discussing weather and neighborhood events with mechanical precision. Outside observers initially attributed this to the success of the community design, but psychological evaluations revealed something disturbing. Residents were losing individual personality traits and memories that didn't conform to the community standard. People forgot personal histories that made them unique, retaining only experiences that were shared with their neighbors. The synchronization accelerated throughout 1987. Residents began speaking in unison during community meetings, moving in coordinated patterns while performing daily tasks, and showing identical emotional responses to stimuli. Brain scans reveal that their neural activity was becoming synchronized across the entire population, 15,000 people thinking the same thoughts at the same time. Child psychologists who studied Cedar Point reported that children born in the community after 1985 showed no individual personality development whatsoever. They were perfect copies of each other, indistinguishable in behavior, speech patterns, and even personal preferences. More disturbing, they seemed to share a collective consciousness, knowing things that had happened to other children without being told. Federal authorities intervened in early 1988 when satellite imagery showed that the residents of Cedar Point were arranging themselves in geometric patterns across the entire suburb during their daily activities, patterns that resembled neural networks or computer circuits when viewed from above. The synchronization had become so complete that 15,000 people were functioning as a single organism. The evacuation was swift and classified. Residents were relocated individually to different cities across the country and given new identities. Psychological deprogramming revealed that most retained no memories of their individual lives before Cedar Point. They could only remember shared community experiences, as if their personal histories had been absorbed into a collective memory. Cedar Point itself was demolished within months, and the land was converted to a nature preserve. Official records show that the suburb was discontinued due to structural problems with the housing development, but psychological studies of former residents continued for years. The most disturbing discovery was that relocated residents continued to show synchronized behavior patterns, even when separated by thousands of miles. They would perform identical actions at the same times, make similar life decisions, and report identical dreams. It was as if the collective consciousness developed in Cedar Point had become permanent, linking the former residents regardless of physical distance. Recent studies suggest that some former residents are unconsciously trying to recreate Cedar Point wherever they live. They buy similar houses, maintain identical yards, and attempt to establish the same community routines that characterize their shared experience. Psychologists refer to this as hive mind persistence syndrome, and inability to function as individuals after extended periods of collective consciousness. Most troubling are reports that children of former Cedar Point residents show signs of the same synchronization tendencies, suggesting that the collective consciousness may be hereditary. These children often display unusual abilities to coordinate with each other and show preferences for geometric patterns and synchronized activities, even with no exposure to the original community. 6. Whitefall Mountain Observatory, Colorado, erased. 1999. Population 0, formerly 23. High in the Colorado Rockies, at coordinates that now show only wilderness, once stood the Whitefall Mountain Observatory, a cutting-edge astronomical research facility that was erased from all records following an incident that shattered our understanding of space and time. Built in 1991 at an elevation of 12,000 feet, Whitefall Observatory housed the most advanced radio telescope array in the world, designed to detect signals from deep space and map the cosmic microwave background radiation. The facility operated in complete secrecy, its research funded by a consortium of government agencies and private aerospace companies. The observatory's mission was to search for evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence, but what they discovered was far more disturbing than alien contact. In 1998, researchers began detecting patterns in cosmic background radiation that suggested our universe was not unique, that we existed in one of infinite parallel realities, all occupying the same space, but separated by dimensional barriers. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the facility's chief astronomer, reported that the telescope array was picking up radio signals from alternate versions of Earth, broadcasts from timelines where history had unfolded differently. They heard news reports from worlds where World War II had never ended, music from civilizations that had developed completely different forms of art, and emergency broadcasts from realities experiencing catastrophes that had never occurred in our timeline. The research team became obsessed with mapping these parallel realities, using increasingly powerful equipment to peer deeper into alternate dimensions. They developed technology that could not only detect other realities but briefly communicate with them. That's when they made the discovery that led to their erasure. Every parallel reality they detected was dying. Across infinite timelines, every version of Earth was experiencing the same phenomenon. Reality was collapsing, dimensions were merging, and the barriers between possible worlds were breaking down. The researchers realized that their own observations were causing the dimensional boundaries to weaken. The act of looking into other realities was destroying the separation between them. The final transmission from Whitefall Observatory, intercepted by NORAD, consisted of Dr. Vasquez screaming that the walls between worlds are gone, and that she could see every possible version of everyone, all existing at the same time. She reported that the observatory was being simultaneously occupied by infinite versions of the research team from different realities, all trying to solve the same problem in the same place. When emergency responders reached the coordinates, they found only empty mountainside. No trace of the observatory, no debris, no evidence that a building had ever existed there. But the space itself was wrong. Photographs taken at the site showed dimensional distortions, with images containing impossible perspectives and objects that exist in multiple states simultaneously. Subsequent investigations revealed that the Whitefall Observatory hadn't been destroyed. It had been dispersed across infinite realities. The building and its occupants still exist, but spread across every possible timeline. Experiencing every possible version of their final moments simultaneously, they achieved their goal of bridging realities but became trapped in the process. Hikers in the area report encountering echo people, translucent figures of the research team, endlessly repeating their final experiments while existing in multiple dimensions at once. These apparitions seem unaware of observers, focused entirely on their work as they experience every possible outcome of their research simultaneously. The most disturbing reports come from amateur radio operators who occasionally pick up broadcasts from the Whitefall Observatory. These transmissions consist of the research team's voices overlapping across multiple realities, describing different versions of their discoveries and warning about the consequences of dimensional observation. The voices speak over each other in an incomprehensible chorus, each describing a different version of the same catastrophic realization. Quantum physicists who have studied the classified reports suggest that the Whitefall team succeeded in breaking down the barriers between realities, but the process scattered their consciousness across infinite timelines. They exist in a state of omniversal awareness, experiencing every possible version of their lives simultaneously, a form of existence that human minds were never designed to endure. 7. Lake Serenity Resort, Minnesota. Erased. 2003. Population 0, formerly 89 staff, 300 seasonal guests. Lake Serenity Resort was Minnesota's premier luxury destination, a sprawling complex of cabins, restaurants, and recreational facilities built around a pristine lake in the northern wilderness. For 12 years, it hosted thousands of visitors, seeking peace and relaxation in an idyllic natural setting. But in 2003, the resort was hastily abandoned and erased from all records following a series of incidents that defied explanation. The resort was known for its unusual effect on guests. Visitors consistently reported feeling more relaxed and peaceful than they had ever experienced. Stress seemed to melt away within hours of arrival, and many guests extended their stays indefinitely, claiming they had never felt such profound tranquility. The resort's marketing emphasized this therapeutic atmosphere, though staff privately admitted they didn't understand what caused it. The first sign of trouble came in 2002 when guests began reporting memory gaps during their stays. Visitors would check in for a weekend and suddenly realize they had been at the resort for weeks with no memory of the elapsed time. They would call their jobs and families, only to discover that no one had noticed their absence, as if time had simply stopped in the outside world while they remained at Lake Serenity. Staff members began experiencing similar phenomena. Employees would start their shifts and find themselves going through the motions of their jobs with no conscious awareness, as if operating on autopilot for hours or days at a time. Security footage showed staff and guests moving in slow, dreamlike patterns, performing routine activities with mechanical precision while displaying expressions of vacant contentment. The resort's isolation became more pronounced in 2003. Delivery trucks began reporting difficulty finding the location, despite having made regular deliveries for years. GPS systems would malfunction when approaching the resort, and cell phone service would cut out completely within a 5-mile radius. Guests found it increasingly difficult to leave. Their cars would develop mechanical problems. Flights would be canceled, and family emergencies that should have prompted immediate departure somehow seemed less urgent once they arrived at Lake Serenity. Dr. Michael Torres, a neuroscientist who visited the resort to study its unusual effects, reported that the area around Lake Serenity exhibited temporal anomalies that seemed to slow the passage of time and induce a state of suspended consciousness in human subjects. His research suggested that something in the lake itself, possibly a natural magnetic field or unknown form of radiation, was affecting human brain chemistry on a massive scale. The final incident occurred during the resort's annual summer festival in August 2003. Over 300 guests and 89 staff members were present when what witnesses described as a temporal freeze occurred. Time seemed to stop completely within the resort boundaries while continuing normally in the outside world. Emergency responders who arrived found the entire population of Lake Serenity standing motionless like living statues, their eyes open but unseeing, breathing but unresponsive. The frozen people remained conscious throughout the incident, later reporting that they had experienced the moment of temporal suspension as lasting for years or decades, though only 3 hours had passed in real time. During their suspended state, they described existing in a perfect moment of peace and contentment, free from all anxiety, pain, or desire. Many begged to return to that state when normal time resumed. Federal authorities evacuated the resort immediately and classified the entire incident. The official story claimed that Lake Serenity Resort had been closed due to environmental contamination, but the facility was actually dismantled piece by piece, and the lake was drained and filled with concrete. The entire area was designated as an ecological research zone with permanent access restrictions. Evacuated guests and staff were subjected to extensive psychological evaluation and treatment. Most suffered from severe depression and anxiety when removed from the resort's influence, describing the normal world as too fast and too harsh compared to the timeless peace they had experienced at Lake Serenity. Several attempted suicide, claiming they could no longer bear existence in real time. The most disturbing follow-up discovery was that Lake Serenity had not been a natural lake at all. Geological surveys revealed that the body of water had appeared suddenly in 1990, forming in a depression that had previously been dry land. The water itself contained no ordinary H2O. It was composed of an unknown substance that resembled water but exhibited properties that violated known physics. Researchers theorized that Lake Serenity had been a temporal sink, a location where time moved differently than in the surrounding world. The resort had been unknowingly built around a natural phenomenon that created a pocket of slowed time, trapping visitors in an eternal moment of artificial peace. The evacuation had been necessary to prevent the temporal anomaly from expanding and potentially affecting larger populations. Former Lake Serenity guests report that they can still feel the pull of the location, describing dreams where they return to the resort and resume the perfect, timeless existence they experienced there. Some have attempted to locate the sealed area, claiming they can sense its presence despite the geographical changes. They describe an overwhelming homesickness for a place that exists outside of normal time, a longing for a peace so profound that normal human existence feels like unbearable chaos in comparison. Finally, these 7 locations represent more than simple government cover-ups or military secrets. They are places where reality itself became unstable, where the normal rules of existence broke down so completely that the only solution was complete erasure from human memory and record. What makes these places truly terrifying is not what happened to them, but what they reveal about the fragility of our reality. They remind us that the world we inhabit is far stranger and more dangerous than we pretend, held together by forces we don't understand and maintained by ignorance we dare not abandon. The governments that erased these places from maps didn't do so to hide mistakes or protect national security. They did it to protect human sanity, to preserve our collective ability to function in a reality that becomes impossible to navigate once you know how easily it can be broken. These locations still exist, somewhere in the spaces between what is and what should be.